Hello everybody, my name is Peter Blattner. I'm the President of the International Commission on Illumination, the CIE, and I would like to welcome you to this short introduction on the CIE position statement on the use of ultraviolet radiation to manage the risk of COVID-19 transmission. Few words about our organization. CIE is the umbrella organization of the National Lighting Association. We are producing technical reports, standards, position statements, organizing some conferences, tutorials. So if you are interested in our to the webpage of CIE. So at this point, I would like to give the floor to Vice President Technical Jennifer Witch. She has prepared some questions to the experts to introduce you to this position statement.
Hi John, you've been our champion within CIE. Can you tell us why this position statement is being published at this time?
CIE made two of its technical reports freely available to the international community in March. These have proved to be extremely popular. Since then, there have been a number of potentially misleading comments and reports on the use of UV, and particularly UVC, for disinfection of coronavirus. UVC was used widely for disinfection of healthcare environments. But that's really been replaced by the use of antibiotics, by vaccines and chemical cleaners. And indeed, there were issues with the introduction of plastics into healthcare environments where the use of UVC was causing photodegradation and essentially destroying the infrastructure of these healthcare environments. We strongly support the view of the World Health Organization that UVC should not be used directly on the skin unless clinically justified. That is why it's important that people with the relevant expertise are involved in the rollout of any UV disinfection program. We also are concerned about the wide number of consumer products suddenly appearing on the market, particularly on online platforms. And as David Sliney will cover in a minute, we have concerns about these either presenting a risk to people who are using them or may not actually be working.
Luke, as the director of CIE Division 6, can you tell us about the position that we have on UV disinfection?
The new CIE position statement summarizes the two key CIE publications that John just spoke about. These two publications discuss the use of UVC radiation for disinfecting air, surfaces, or sterilizing water. UVC radiation must never be used to disinfect the body, and especially exposure to skin and eyes should always be avoided unless under clinical supervision. These two documents set out the safety thresholds for 8-hourly exposures to UVC. These safety thresholds depend on the wavelength, as you can see on the slide right now. Care must be taken to never exceed these safety thresholds.
Tony, as our Division 2 director, we know that you're the expert on measurement. What are the issues or concerns that might arise with measurement of germicidal UV?
Measurement of ultraviolet radiation is difficult, and it's very easy to end up with large errors in our measurements. The most significant source of error likely to be encountered in practice is spectral mismatch, and this occurs when the calibration source and the measured source have significantly different spectra. Now, the responsivity of UV radiometers vary a lot from wavelength to wavelength, and this varies a lot from instrument to instrument. In the examples shown here, a radiometer calibrated using the 254 nanometer mercury line may end up with a measurement error of around 50% when measuring a 265 nanometer UV LED. This doesn't necessarily mean that the instrument is bad, it's about getting the calibration and the use of the equipment right. Other significant sources of error include neglecting correction factors. It's important to read the calibration certificate and apply any corrections that are reported. Directional response. This is where the angular subtents of the calibration source and the source being measured may significantly different to each other. Also sensor degradation, where the responsivity of the detector may change over time due to environmental factors or due to exposure to the UV itself. And also reflectances. Surfaces that are coloured black may not reflect much visible light, but they might still reflect a lot of UV light. This is important both for the measurement and also for personal exposure. Back to you, Jennifer.
David, we know that there's a lot of consumer products being proposed or on the market for germicidal UV. What concerns are there that we might need to know about?
Well, there are a number of devices known as air purifiers that have an ultraviolet lamp totally enclosed, and that's not an issue. But what we're particularly concerned with are the handheld devices that produce a fairly intense UVC emission close at the surface. And although some have safety features such that if they're turned up, they turn off. But with children around in the domestic setting, it's not a safe situation. So we generally recommend just avoid those, not only because of the UV safety issue, but also because most of them do not emit enough energy to sterilize the surface in the short time that somebody is generally going to wave them across as a wand. So I think people would be well put not to purchase those. I understand the interest, but nothing is worse than to think you've sterilized something and in fact you haven't.
Richard, I know you've worked for a long time in hospitals on how to use germicidal UV. What can you tell us about how it might be used in hospital environments?
Upper room germicidal UV systems have been applied for over 70 years successfully in various settings, from hospitals to homeless shelters to prisons and various places where it's high-risk transmission. It has been used against influenza virus, it's been used against tuberculosis and many other infectious diseases, and it works against coronavirus as well. It is the primary recommendation for controlling the airborne spread of COVID virus. A secondary airborne strategy would be through the ventilation circuit. Many hospitals that have mechanical ventilation will recirculate their air about 15 times per hour. And so having a germicidal UV lamp within the air duct itself is a good strategy for secondary disinfection of the virus that may have escaped the upper room application. A third method that is being used for germicidal UV is whole room UV, and this is primarily to deal with contact spread. This is where droplets land on surfaces and can stay alive for many hours and days. And so strategies for dealing with these surface-borne contaminations are mobile units that are rolled into a patient's room when it is unoccupied. A timer is switched on and people exit the room and close the door, and then the unit switches on and decontaminates the various surfaces in the room. These types of systems have to be moved in different areas to overcome the various shadowing effects of UV. A fourth way that germicidal UV is used is for direct UV in operating theaters. So let's cover this once again. Various places in the healthcare system where you might want to consider upper room UV would be in the waiting rooms, the emergency rooms, dental suites, autopsy, various high-risk areas where people are having transplants, cancer, HIV, and other places where they have compromised immune systems. Germicidal UV can be a benefit in all these areas to not only protect the staff who are caring for patients, but also for the patients and their loved ones that come to visit in these healthcare facilities.
Thank you, Jennifer, and all the experts for this useful information. If you are more interested in the topic, please go to the CI webpage and read the position statement in detail. I also would like to draw your attention on an online tutorial that we are going to organize in August. Also, registration can be found on the webpage, and you can also use the QR tag which is indicated here on the screen.